a little bit when I was in college. Actually, later in college, I was working somewhere in South Arkansas and had my own little apartment. And late at night, they had like 5 channels, and one of them showed Star Trek reruns at like 10 o'clock every night. And I got into it. I'd always liked space stuff and the idea of space exploration and everything. So it just kind of appealed to me. So I kind of got into Star Trek. Never had in my life before. Well, a few years ago, William Shatner, who was the original Captain Kirk, did a Saturday Night Live skit. And I had never seen it until yesterday. I'd heard about it. But when I realized that our lesson was going a certain direction, I thought, I want to look at that skit. And it really fit. So I'm gonna share this SNL skit, at least part of it, with you. I actually cut off that skit a little early for a reason. As you can imagine. The skit is funny because it just kind of points out the ridiculousness of some of the things that we invest our life and time into. I mean, crying out loud, it's a TV show, you spend hours and hours, obsessing over something that's so, in the grand scheme of things, seems fairly insignificant. Now, if you're a diehard Trekkie, please don't be offended, but, it's a TV show. Now, we do that with a lot of things. I mean, we could say that with someone who's really obsessed with video games or something that spends hours and hours and hours on something that, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't accomplish a whole lot. Or maybe, this will hit a little closer to home, maybe someone who is obsessively watching sports, who just spends hours and hours watching sports and just gets into it. And I remember when the New York Giants beat the Patriots for the second time in the Super Bowl, and Tom Brady was getting death threats. And I mean, people were just spewing this venomous stuff on the internet. I mean, how dare they fall short of winning that Super Bowl? Now, since then, that's happened dozens of times. I mean, it gets so common that you don't even think about it. But I mean, I read about these things, and I think, seriously, guys, this is a game. This is a game. This is entertainment, okay? This is not, actual real life. This is an entertainment sort of thing. You don't, get a life. If your life's happiness depends on a team performing well, man, there's just something up. Some are obsessed with their bodies, with having a body that's not just healthy, but impressive. Spending hours and hours and hours every week to make their body impressive in some way. And I'm all about having a healthy body, but if you're trying to make your body impressive, at some point you got to ask, who am I trying to impress? Who is it that I'm trying to impress? Maybe I need to get a life because I'm investing all my life into something that is decaying anyway, is rotting away anyway, is going to die all the same. We might say it about, this will hit home. Do you spend more time invested in social media and the internet than you do in the actual world around you? I mean, does your phone kind of just absorb the lion's share of your time during the day? A few weeks back, I shared with you some statistic that I'd researched that the average person spent it was 10 hours a day on the internet, and so it was some obscene number. Do I need to get a life? I wonder if my cell phone, if after I'd been on the internet for 5 minutes, if it just kind of automatically flashed up a message, get a life, I wonder if that would just, help me to okay, that's enough of that. I need to get on with actually, living life. It is so easy for us to invest our lives in things that have very little ultimate benefit. Why would I do that? Why would I want to do it? You might have said, you probably have, you've probably told somebody at some time in your life, you've probably said, would you get a life? Where'd you get a life? And probably somebody has said it to you, or at least they said it about you behind your back. You know, man, he needs to get a life. You know, really, seriously. Why do we say that to people? Why do we tell people to get a life? Usually, one of two reasons. One is, like we just discussed, someone is just investing so much of their life in something that we don't see as very important. It's just like, what, you know, get a life, you know. But also, we will say that to somebody who is, we might say, overly invested in the drama in other people's lives. Someone who gossips, someone who loves to find out all the drama that's happening in everybody's life around them. And you kind of get to the point where you say, you know, if you need everybody else's drama to make your life more interesting, maybe there's something missing. Maybe there's something that you need to find that's just not there. And maybe you need to get a life. We, and probably everybody else we know, need to get a life. I'm not talking about the scientific, you know, definition of life. I mean, you know, because we might ask, because this is a big deal. When we say get a life, it's important for us to ask, well, what kind of life am I talking about? What do I mean when I say get a life? How will I know that I have a life? You know, what is that? And we're not talking about the scientific definition of life. All of us are living by that definition. We mean something more, don't we? We mean something fuller, something deeper when we say, get a life. I've been thinking about this, and I'm probably missing something major, but our culture overall, our pop culture, I think generally sees life as one of two things: success or romance. If you are successful in what you do, you know, you have a life. If you have romance in your life, if you have that someone special in your life, then you have a life. Did you notice how, well, we'll kind of focus on the romance part. Did you notice how when Shatner was making fun of the fellow Trekkies that he mentioned that, you know, have you ever kissed a girl? You know, like that is something that Hollywood tells us is life. If you don't have... We'll see a lot of movies. There's a whole lot of movies based on the fact that there's some dude or some girl who is super successful, makes lots of money, you know, super successful in what they do, but they're miserable. And what is the whole plot of the movie? They find someone special. Someone special enters their life, and then they realize life, the whole new world opens up. Life is about this relationship and not just about their success. And there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for that. But the reality is that romances are just shattering around us. A lot of you experienced that. Romance is just breaking apart. And we want our lives, we want our romances to be like in the movies. When in reality, the people who are acting in the movies, their lives are as shattered as ours. And their romances are certainly as shattered as ours. And so at least some people recognize, you know, it's not simply the romance. Because the more we focus on romance, the more our culture puts emphasis on romance, the more we become dissatisfied with our lives. We're disappointed with our lives. That this is not what I wanted. This is not what I dreamed it would be. And everything begins to fall apart because the romances just can't live up to what we envision in the movies. And so some of us say, you know, it's not just about that. There's something there, but you know, also there's other relationships. There's, you know, we emphasize our parent-child relationships and how important those things are to us. We emphasize friendship relationships sometimes. So we kind of open it up, and this whole focus on relationships has something to say for it. It's kind of halfway there. We recognize that life is deeper and richer and fuller when we have intimate relationships with other people. When we have real, genuine relationships with others. But even then, it's so incomplete. It's so missing. It's missing something. Because all of those relationships are changing. We enter different phases of life. Our children grow up. Our spouses have difficulties. Our parents die. Even children die. Friends move away. Friends move on. Those relationships that we see as so important are in the process of changing or falling by the wayside. And so when we hang our life on those human relationships, when that's my life, my family, I hear this all the time, my family is my life. These people, my friends, are my life. My marriage is my life. We are going to be constantly frustrated, disappointed, anxious, longing, because those relationships are changing. They're not going to be like they are, and we sense that. We sense it's pulling away. Just hold that thought for a moment. There was a man named John who led an extraordinary life, and what made his life, what began his life to be extraordinary, was the fact that he spent several years, probably around 3, living with and working with this man named Jesus. And that experience so shapes his life that he spent the rest of his life telling people about this man Jesus, and telling them the things that Jesus had said, and telling them the things that Jesus had did, and what that had to do with their life, telling them that Jesus had opened up a new world, that God was making things new, and it started with him. And John claimed something. He claimed something that was very, you read it, and it's just like, really? John claimed that this man, Jesus, was the secret to having life. That to get a life, you somehow needed him. And we're gonna talk about that claim briefly. John wrote 4 little books. One was kind of big. We call it the Gospel of John. It really tells the story of Jesus. And then there were 3 little books that he wrote that were just letters that he wrote to Christians, the longest of which we call 1 John. And in 1 John, he begins by explaining why it is that his view of Jesus mattered, okay? He started out like this, started his letter. This is 1 John chapter 1, beginning in verse 1. We proclaim to you the one who existed from the beginning, whom we have heard and seen. We saw him with our own eyes, and we touched him with our own hands. He is the word of life. This one who is life itself was revealed to us, and we have seen him. And now we testify and proclaim to you that he is the one who is eternal life. He was with the Father, and then he was revealed to us. We proclaim to you what we ourselves have actually seen and heard, so that you may have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. We are writing these things so that you may fully share our joy. The first thing John does is to say who Jesus is and why he knows who Jesus is. The coolest thing about reading books from people like John and Peter are that they didn't just believe that Jesus was, and that Jesus did amazing things, and that Jesus really was the Son of God. They didn't just believe that. They experienced it. They saw him. They saw what he did. They heard what he said. They touched him. He was there, and they experienced it with him. He didn't just tell us what he hoped was true. He told us what he knew was true. That's what makes reading the Bible so exciting. A few weeks back, this is quite a few weeks back, I was teaching the 1st through 3rd grade class on a Wednesday night. And for some reason, we went to the map, and I was showing them the Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, and the Dead Sea. And one of the kids, of course, raised their hand and said, "Why is it called the Dead Sea? Why is it called dead?" And so I explained, well, the Dead Sea is so salty that fish can't live in it. They call it the Dead Sea. And I said, the Dead Sea is so salty that you can't sink in it. I went to the Dead Sea one time, and it was really, really cool. I came to the shore, and I started walking into the Dead Sea. It was clear water, but super salty, and I kind of splashed a little bit, and it got in my eye. Oh my goodness, it burned like crazy. But after and then I tried to wipe my eye. Now it had salt water on it. Those was kind of, But then I got into the water, and as soon as I got up to about right here, my feet just boop. And I just started floating. I said I could just spread out, and the whole top of my body would be above the water because you just float. The water was so salty. And these kids, their eyes were getting big because now the Dead Sea was becoming real to them. It wasn't just something on a map. It wasn't just a word they read in the Bible. They got to talk to an eyewitness of the Dead Sea, someone who had actually swam in the Dead Sea, and that was just cool. Now all of a sudden it becomes so much more real. John got to talk about Jesus, and he would tell people about Jesus, and the reason it was so convincing, and the reason it spread so quickly was because he'd been there. He was an eyewitness. He had seen and heard and touched Jesus. And so what he had to say about Jesus really mattered. So in these first few sentences of his little letter, John says several things about Jesus. He says Jesus existed from the beginning. That Jesus was with the Father from the beginning. That he came to earth and that he revealed God to us. And that he is the word of life, which basically means he is the revealer of life. He's the message of life. He's the revealer of life. And not only does he reveal life, John said, he is life. Just soak that in. He is life. And he's not talking about just physical life. He says he is eternal life. Now that phrase messes us up somewhat, because a lot of you who grew up in church, when you hear the word eternal life, you think heaven, eternal life, heaven. It just goes automatically, as though eternal life was something that you're going to experience sometime off in the future. You have your regular life here, and then there will be eternal life after you die. That's something off in the future, when that's not true at all. Eternal life is not a particular time of life. It's eternal, okay? Time doesn't apply. Eternal life is a quality of life. It is a kind of life. It is God's life. God is, He has eternal life in Him. He is eternal life. He is the source of it. He is the spreader of it. He is eternal life. And John says, Jesus is the Son of God. And just as God has life in Him, just as God is life, so also Jesus is life. That's kind of confusing. That's kind of ethereal, kind of up there. Let me try to say it this way. Life is not a thing. Life is a person. Life is not something you do. Life is someone who is. And that to know life, to know eternal quality kind of life, is to know Jesus. This is something that John, apparently this point that I'm trying to make that really is difficult to make because it does seem out there, it was so important to John that we understand it, that he just repeats it in different ways. In just this little 5-chapter book, he repeats it over and over and explains it in different ways over and over because he feels it's so important. Let me share some of these things with you, okay? Besides this verse right here, John says this.
2:24-25. So you must remain faithful to what you've been taught from the beginning. If you do, you will remain in fellowship with the Son and with the Father. And in this fellowship, we enjoy eternal life, the eternal life He promised us. Now, you get this by having fellowship, that's close relationship with Jesus. He says, we experience eternal life. In chapter 4, verse 9, John says this. He says, God showed us how much He loved us by sending His one and only Son into the world so that we might have eternal life through Him. He keeps on bringing it up again, chapter 5, verse 11 and 12. And this is what God has testified. He has given us eternal life, and this life is in His Son. Whoever has the Son has life. Whoever does not have God's Son does not have life. And He brings it up again, chapter 5, verse 20. And now we live in fellowship with the true God, because we live in fellowship with His Son, Jesus Christ. He is the only God. He's the only true God, and He is eternal life. Now, obviously, this point was important for John to make. This is something that Christians need to understand, that Jesus is eternal life. That Hollywood is onto something. That life is found in relationship. And the very fact that God's seed, a bit of God, is in each of us, having relationships with one another does give us a glimpse of real life. But it's not complete. Because real life and eternal life hinges on a relationship with Jesus. What John calls fellowship. John uses several different words that we translate as fellowship with Jesus. Now, again, for those of you who grew up in church, fellowship is not church potlucks. Okay? I grew up, I equated, what is fellowship? We're going to have a fellowship. What did that mean? We were going to have a church potluck. You know, whenever the church does something together and eats together and hangs out together, that's fellowship. No, it's not. Now, it can be part of fellowship for sure. Fellowship, in fact, one of the words that John uses that we translate fellowship is a word that is used to talk about the relationship between a man and a woman in marriage. The most intimate relationship that could be described. Fellowship is relationship. It is deep and is an abiding relationship. So what he says is that if you want to have life, that you need Jesus. You need a relationship with Jesus. You need to walk with Jesus. You need to be in Jesus, in His circle, in His influence, in His family, in relationship with Him, because that is where life is found. I realize when we say things like that, and we say things like, life, if you want real life, you need a relationship with Jesus. A lot of you, your minds instantly go to what you're going to have for lunch. Because that just, what does that look like? What does that mean? What is that, a relationship? I don't even see Jesus. How do I have a relationship with Him? And I don't get it. I mean, some of you might say, don't tell me I need a relationship with Jesus. Tell me what I need to do to have a relationship with Jesus. I mean, do I need to spend 3 hours in prayer every day? Because I lose concentration after 5 minutes. It's just not realistic for me. How do I have this relationship with Jesus? And John, as theological as he is and how big picture it is that he thinks and the way he communicates, John also gives concrete examples and concrete instructions on what it looks like to have a relationship with Jesus. And John really doesn't focus so much, as some others do, John doesn't really focus so much on the prayer and the solitude and the fasting, which are definitely the parts of having a relationship with God, having a relationship with Jesus. John focuses more on just how you live life, what your life looks like as you live it. Because living with Jesus is true life, is really living life. And John talks about several things. We're going to look at them in the next just couple of weeks. in more detail, but let's just go ahead and just shoot them out there. John says, if you want to have real life, which means if you want to know Jesus, if you want a relationship with Jesus and have real life, then first of all, believe Jesus, okay? Believe Him. Really the first step in having a relationship with Jesus is to believe Him. Now that involves believing who He is, that He really is the Son of God, that He really is God who came in the flesh and lived a real human life and really gave His life for us, and that He rose from the dead. And the coolest thing is that John says, I was with Jesus. I ate with Jesus after He rose from the dead. I mean, this really, really happened. But for us to believe those things about Jesus. But believing Jesus is not just believing about Jesus. I figure the majority of you believe in Jesus in some way. You believe He existed. You believe some claims about Him and stuff. But believing Jesus is more than just believing things about Him. It is believing what He said. Believing what He did. Believing Him when He says, okay, this is what you need to do. This is what life is all about. This is what you need to focus on. This is what's important. And believe Him. And if you believe Jesus, something's going to happen. If you really believe Him, if you really trust Him, you're going to obey what He says. Now, we don't like the word obey, okay? We teach our kids to obey. It's really important for us to teach our kids to obey. But when we become adults, we don't like the word obey anymore, okay? We don't want to obey anymore. We got other people, obey us. But it simply means that I trust Jesus to the point when He tells me something, I buy into it and I go for it. That is what obedience is when it comes to Jesus, is that I trust Him. And I want to live the life that He describes, that He wants for me, because I know life is in Him. So I will obey what He says, what He commands. And what does He command? Chief among those commandments is He commands us to love the people around us. And we may hear this all the time. And our culture tells us love is the most important thing, love is great love, but we really struggle with it. Because when I choose to listen to Jesus, when I choose to believe Jesus and trust Him enough to love people, that means I have to be done. I have to reject. I have to hate hatred in me. That if there is hatred in me, that it must be rejected. That I cannot allow that to be and dwell inside of me. I've got to get rid of it. Jealousy doesn't belong. Jealousy won't fit. Cannot have that within me. I'm going to love that person who my sinful nature wants to be jealous of because they have or what they do or whatever it is that I might be. That if I love contempt for people, I struggle with this one. People who I think are really stupid, especially people in power who I think are really stupid, it's just really easy for me to have contempt for them, to just dismiss them, to sneer at them. Contempt doesn't belong in the heart of a child of God. Loving people means loving those, caring about those. Doesn't mean necessarily trusting everybody. It doesn't mean necessarily, following everybody for sure. You don't need to be around everybody. But to truly care for others' welfare, truly love people. John says that if you want to live life with Jesus, which is real life, which is eternal life, life with Jesus, life in Jesus, is getting a life. It's what life is all about. If you want that, you start with believing Him, trusting Him, following Him, and letting that impact and transform the way you look at everybody else that is around you. Living life with Jesus is living life. Let's pray.